Hello and welcome to the Module 3B presentation for ECU311, which is on music and methodologies. So we talked last week about music in Module 3A, and today we're talking about music and methodologies. So we're going to build upon the content that we talked about last week. If you'd like to follow along with me, head on over to LearnLine, and inside ECU311, click on the Learning Material Module 3B. There's some stuff in here which I suggest you have a look at. You can do that in your own time, whether that's before you listen to this recording, during, if you want to pause me and go away and read as we go through it, or afterwards. There's 3 attached files. So you've got the Music Review Report, which was conducted out of the University of Western Australia, Dr. Sharon Leers, her National Review, and then you've also got the previous PowerPoint presentation, which was developed by Sharon and the previous lecturer, and that's on the based on the textbook. So you can see here you've got all the information in here on music methodologies and approaches for young children. I'm going to be going through this. I'll put that into my own presentation based on the content which is on LearnLine here. And if you would also like to follow along with that presentation, you can go down to the bottom of the Module 3B on LearnLine and click the link here, Module 3B presentation link. So click that and download that. And that's what I'll be basing this presentation off. Okay, so there are 4 music methodologies. You've got the Suzuki method, the I'm not sure how to say this, but the Kodaly method, the Schulwerk approach, and the Dalcroze approach, possibly Dalcroze, I would say. So the Suzuki method was devised by Shinichi Suzuki, who lived from 1898 to 1998. He was a Japanese musician. It was known as the mother tongue approach, where young children learn music the same way they learn a language. And that comes from Dr. Sharon Leers' research. The students learn a musical instrument through private instrumental music instruction as well as group classes. In the Kodaly method, it was created by Zoltan, of that surname, who lived from 1882 to 1967. He was a Hungarian composer and music educationalist who displayed his love of folk music. He did much to promote folk music by collecting Hungarian melodies and publishing books on folk music. The method has been adapted in many countries where they use their own folk music as the musical content. So if you can consider, Suzuki was all about students learning, or as the mother tongue approach, students learning a musical instrument as they would learn a language. Kodaly method is all about folk music. Then got the Schulwerk approach, created by Karl Orff, who lived from 1885 to 1982, from Austria in Europe, in which he combines the 3 intertwined elements of music, movement, and speech through language, singing, movement, and playing musical instruments. There is an emphasis on improvisation and skill. So it's all about combining the 3 elements being music, movement, and speech. And then the 4th and final is the Dalcroze approach, developed by Emily Jacques Dalcroze, who lived from 1865 to 1950, and I'm sure Sharon will be able to help you with how to pronounce these names properly as the arts expert in this area for this unit. A Swiss music educator, composer, performer, and professor of music. Dalcroze's approach to music education was based on the idea that musical rhythm is found within the body, and it is the body that is the expressive tool. So if we just go back quickly and summarize, Suzuki is all about the mother tongue approach. So learning a musical instrument learning music is done in the same way that you learn a language. The Kodaly approach is about folk music. The Schulwerk approach is about using the 3 elements being music, movement, and speech, and it's all about improvisation. And the Dalcroze approach is the idea that musical rhythm is found within the body, and the body is an expressive tool. So why music? Why teach music in schools? Music is an important part in developing the whole child. So from a holistic point of view, there is a recognised music intelligence. So if we look at the Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, musical intelligence is one of them. There is research and evidence to show that music education can assist in learning, creativity, and development of the whole child. So we spoke last week about learning and memory essentially being the same thing. Learning is about remembering something, or so learning something, you don't actually learn something if you don't remember it. So learning and memory is closely linked, essentially the same thing. And music helps you to learn, and it helps you to be creative as well as develop the whole person. Music can also be an alternative way of expression, so be able to express yourself in a different way, which may not necessarily be through body movement. It may also not necessarily be through language, but it's an alternative way of expression, and it's a unique means of communication, so a unique way to communicate, and it is just that, a form of communication. Stories from a cultural point of view are passed down from generation to generation through music. Music can also link to other subjects, for example, maths and English. Music and child development. So you can use music in order to help develop children. So if we go through and talk starting off with babies, for example, music can be used to pacify a baby, to stop it from crying, to make it feel soothed and comforted, relaxed, and loved. It can be used in terms of play with a baby and creating movement. It can be used to stimulate a baby in order to make it feel excited, and it can also be used to help a baby fall asleep. So using different elements of music to achieve each one of those purposes. Toddlers, music can be used with toddlers and developing the toddler to learn new concepts in memory development, so remember different things, repetition, physical development, and encourage listening and recognition of differences, so expressions of emotion, so you can play different music and different sounds to express different emotions such as happiness, sadness, and anger, three of the sort of more foundational emotions to humans. So to learn new concepts, songs can be used to learn new concepts in toddlers, to remember things, so to remember a whole range of things, but in memory development, so to strengthen their ability to be able to convert short-term to long-term memory with a concept, and so on. It can be used in school in terms of teamwork, and I think about school sports days in this respect, to stimulate children, to stimulate them to be excited about learning, or just as one example, in repetition, when you need to repeat something in order to convert it into long-term memory and links to other subjects, as well as with adults in terms of entertainment, expression of emotion again, patriotism, so for example, national anthems, certain ballads such as Waltzing Matilda, in love, so having a song together with a significant other, which represents, a moment in your life together, which typically is when you first met, and aspects of life. So that could be, if we talk about, whether in terms of love, we can also talk about in terms of birth and death and so on. Can be used in musicals. So musical therapists use the power of music to help patients, and music can be used to help patients heal faster. And music is a part of lifelong learning, because your brain activates different parts when you're listening to music as opposed to just hearing words. So, and I don't know if I talked about it in this class or not, but I remember doing a grade 11 assignment, psychology assignment, with two classes that I had, and just a couple of years ago, and we were looking at Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the Beatles song, and half the group had to have the lyrics read to them, and the other half of the class had the song played to them, and they had to try and remember. They had to write down the lyrics to the song after hearing it, and the students who listened to the song far and away remembered much more of the lyrics than the children who had the lyrics read to them. So what's happening is there's more connections being activated in the brain, and it's how children or anyone, children and adults, learn more effectively through music, because you put jingles with things, for example, and connections are made more strongly, but also across different aspects of the brain, not just one component of the brain. It's an example of why advertising works with jingles. So musical intelligence. Educator David Lazia defines music intelligence in the following way. So if you are strong in the intelligence of music, so in this area, you likely have a love of music and rhythmic patterns. So you'll find, so if you are any of these, you can tell that you typically will probably have a higher intelligence in terms of music. You're probably very sensitive to sounds in the environment, so the chirp of a cricket, rain on the roof, and varying traffic patterns. So you'll be sensitive to those sounds, and you will notice them more than other people, say, for example. But you'll definitely, you could be sitting there working and there's a sound, and you notice that more than something which someone walks past, or in terms of seeing or feeling. You may study and work better with music in the background, so you could, if you've got music playing in the background, most likely it will be instrumental music, because lyrics can influence and become counteractive in terms of learning or working productively. But if you find that you feel more at ease and more comfortable, and you can learn better and you can work more efficiently with music playing in the background, then chances are you've got a higher musical intelligence. You can often reduce a melody or rhythmic pattern after hearing it, reproduce a rhythm or rhythmic pattern after hearing it only once. So you don't need to hear something many times to be able to reproduce that rhythm or melody. So various sounds, tones, and rhythms may have a visible effect on you, so you'll notice it in your facial expressions. Others will be able to see that change in your facial expressions, or your body movement, or an emotional response in some way. So you will typically have more of a response from music, which people will be able to see and notice. You probably like to create music and enjoy listening to a wide variety of music, and you may be skilled at mimicking sounds, so with using your mouth, your tongues, an ability to be able to mimic sounds, animals in the environment, say, for example, or people, their tones and the way they talk, language accents, and others. So speech patterns is an example, being able to mimic speech patterns, and you can probably readily recognise different musical instruments in a composition. So when there's an orchestra playing, you can easily pick out what instruments are a part of that orchestra, and when they're playing and the type of music that they're playing. But typically you'll be able to pick out those different instruments in a group of instruments playing together. And it's things that reminds me of like taste. So music is an example, having the intelligence or a stronger sense of taste. There's people, and I watch My Kitchen Rules and shows like that, and I just think, how do they pick out what ingredients are in food? And I remember on MasterChef one time, one of the activities was I had to say what 15 ingredients were in this dish, and it was like salt, pepper, chili, whatever, garlic, and they went through, and some people were incredibly talented and intelligent in this area in being able to pick out what food there was. There's no way I could do that. To me, it just all tastes like food, and I'd be lucky to pick out one thing, and I'd probably guess salt and pepper, because simply chances are there's probably salt and pepper in it. But it's an example of an intelligence in that area, and what it says to me is that it can be developed through practice. So you might get some people who are genetically more intelligent in one of these areas, for example, music, but you can develop that through practice. and then we can get into the whole 10,000 hour thing. There's a lot of stuff at the moment now saying that the 10,000 hour rule in terms of becoming a expert in an area is not necessarily the case. And if you read the book, The Sports Gene, it talks about that even before it was beginning to be challenged, was that the 10,000 hour rule could be anywhere potentially from 3,000 hours through to 40,000 hours, depending on the person's background and experience. So, so many factors that influence. So the 10,000 hour rule very much now is kind of on its way out. It is all about practice, and there's no set number of hours that you need to spend on something because there's so many factors which can influence that. So music and the brain. Music can be used by the brain for three things: arousal, as a carrier, and as a primer. So in terms of arousal, it can affect the mood and response. So scary music, if you watch a scary movie, for example, most people know that if you turn the sound off, it's not as scary. It's still a little bit scary depending on what's happening in the scene, but it's nowhere near as scary as when you've got those high-pitched, squeaky, squealy, super, just high-pitched sounds, which build up throughout a scene. Repetitive music, for example, so create a trance, military music, lullabies, etc., can all calm or excite students. So arousal can go either way. It can become more relaxing and calming, or it can be more motivating and exciting. Music can be used as a carrier, so the melody helps memory and recall, hence the power of advertising jingles, which I touched on earlier. And the same can be done to learn certain rules or timetables. So if you're trying to get students to remember a rule, if you put it into a song, they're more likely, into a nice little jingle, they're more likely to remember what those rules are. Timetables, I remember I went to Karama Primary School and lived in Karama initially, but then we moved out to Howard Springs, and we continued to live in, we continued to go to Karama Primary because my mother worked there. So it was, at the time, a 30-minute drive in each day, and my mum used to play a cassette, and we had to, and that would play the time of the times tables, and that would play every single morning on the way to school. 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, and so on. But I went through all the 1s times tables, 2 times tables, all the way through to 12, and it was just on the whole time. I don't know how she managed it, actually. I don't know how she didn't go mad, but just whether we sung along with that or not, it was there playing. So it was being drilled into our heads, and as a result, I remember in grade 5 thinking that to myself, I'm really good at multiplication. I never felt like I was good at maths after that, particularly after grade 10, but certainly in the higher grades of primary school, I thought that I was really, really good at multiplication, and I think a lot of that came back to, 1, we did Kumon, and 2, from listening to those cassettes in the car every single morning for half an hour. But the reason why they were so effective was not because we sat there going 1 times 1, 1 times 2, and so on. It was the music, and so it made you want to sing along with it. So it made you want to learn times tables, which would otherwise potentially be quite dry, because it was fun to sing, but also because of what's going on in the brain in terms of how your brain organises and remembers things when it's done to a tune as opposed to simply said. And as a primer, research has shown that music can train the brain for higher forms of thinking. So as I touched on earlier, music can link to other subjects. For example, language in terms of speech development, so using poems, chants and songs, and as well as maths, so in times tables, memory chants, and so on. And we start getting into graphic notation and using notes and things on music. For example, like 1 beat, this is equal to 1, 2, 4, half a beat, whatever. So you start to get into maths that way as well. Music in the classroom. So you can use music activities in between lessons when children tire, or even during a lesson. So if you want children to sort of stay upbeat and energized, you can use more energetic music during a lesson. You can use it at the start of a lesson to get children inspired about that lesson. You can use it towards the end of that lesson to when children start to tire, to keep them kind of energetic and going. You can use it as a transition between lessons. So music is very much a strong classical conditioning, operant conditioning tool in terms of psychology. And so you can play music, which means come down to the mat. So certain music means come down to the mat. Or certain music means move on to the next activity. So when you hear a sound or particular music played, it can mean certain things, and then saving your voice. And I'll talk later about the importance. Your voice is probably your most important tool as a teacher, and to use that. But you also need to recognise that and save your voice. So the less talking you can do, I learnt, particularly teaching PE, the better. So if you can use different sounds, in PE we used a whistle, for example. So 1 whistle meant go in a game, 2 whistles meant stop, and 3 meant come in. So we weren't constantly trying to yell across an indoor space or an outdoor space to tell children to go, stop, or come in and listen to the next instruction. Same can be used in a classroom. There's so many conversations that you're having on a daily basis as a teacher that if you can hit play, and that means to go and do X, Y, Z, then that is very beneficial to you and your voice in saving your vocal cords. You can use it as a specific music lesson, and you can integrate it with other subjects. So I've already touched on maths. You can use it in reading and writing, and you can include music. So the music lesson. So music is literacy. You can communicate through music. You can tell a story. Assignment 1 is really all about incorporating 3 of the 5 art forms, and which are visual art, media art, dance, drama, and music. So music is very much can be linked into drama, very much linked into dance, and can be used as one of those 3 forms. If I really like the idea of that assignment being a visual art, music, and dance, and in that order. So you can communicate through music. So there are different musical elements, and I'm just going to go through these now. For each one, I'm going to talk about what they are and activities for exploring them or developing them. And it's not limited. I'll talk about slightly different things here, but the musical elements are pitch, duration, harmony, structure, dynamics, tone color, texture, and tempo. So activities to explore these musical instruments are singing, listening, getting children to listen, playing instruments, dance and movement, reading and notation, so graphic notation, composing, and play-based learning. Let's go on to listening quickly first. The importance of listening. To hear what people are actually saying. So not just listening to the words, but listening to the tone and pitch and so on. To understand what is being said. Communication is a two-way process. So does that mean if you send somebody a text message is a form of communication? If communication is a two-way process and you send somebody an email or a text message, does that mean that's a form of communication? They have to receive that message in order for it to be communicated. And it becomes very difficult, as we know, when you're communicating through text only, and so emoticons have become so popular to get the little what people are actually trying to say across. So there's so many little things in terms of communication, in terms of body language, facial expression, tone, pitch, and so on, in when people are communicating that you don't get when it's just text. So to recognise hidden meanings, to share ideas and work collaboratively, to show compassion, and all of the above for music as well. So in terms of music, the importance of listening to music, to hear what people are saying in the music, to understand what's being said in the music, to recognise hidden meanings in the music in terms of the different musical elements, for example, the harmony, the structure, the dynamics, the tone, colour, and so on. To share ideas and to show compassion. Activities that involve listening. So you can choose 2 songs, one with lyrics and one without. Then if you were to do that, play the music, sharing your first experience and your initial reactions to that music. So if you go back and find music in your own collection, which one has lyrics and one doesn't, and think about the first time you experienced that music. So try and choose a collection of music which you have listened to since you were a child. It might be a nursery rhyme or a lullaby. And I even think about like a hum that my grandmother did to us when we were all children, in terms of a song or a hum without lyrics, and consider what your first experience was with that and your reactions to that then and to now. Discuss the difference between the 2 songs, and which do you prefer and why. Why do you prefer one over the other? You might say, I don't prefer one over the other, but one has a particular meaning, another one has a completely different meaning. Can the music without words still express ideas? And if so, how? What ideas does the song, the music without the words, express? When I think of the humming with my grandma, the tune she used to make to put us to sleep, which was La La La, it was pretty much the whole thing over and over. Like the feelings that I still get today, are very comforting and relaxing. What instruments and voices do you hear? And then draw what happens in the first song and add words to describe it. So the song with lyrics, draw what happens in that song. Create the song in any way you like. So it might be a written story, an artwork, using musical instruments. You might do a movement or a dance activity, or even create a poem from that. And then you can use children in their own music and or their parents or grandparents in this. So you can do this with children in terms of a song which they know of, which is familiar to them. Okay, so to go into the musical elements, we've got a beat first. So what is a beat? It's a constant pulse, and it can be likened to your heartbeat. It doesn't need to stay the same all the time. It can go faster, it can go slower, but it is constant. And activities to explore and develop beat, the element of beat. So you can keep a beat using body percussion. So using your hands in terms of clapping, whether it's hand on hand or hand on chest or hands on legs. For example, the Goldilocks song, where you something to do We Will Rock You. But I remember we used to do clap 1 2 clap 1 2 in probably transitional grade 1. So I still remember learning that Goldilocks song and using body percussion to go with it. And I couldn't get it when I was a young kid, and it used to frustrate the heck out of me. And I hated that I couldn't do it, and when it seemed like everyone else could. But I do remember when I did start to get it a little bit later on, around probably grade 2 or grade 3, and I thought it was pretty cool that I could do it. You can also use your feet, so for marching, so stomping your feet on the ground to make different beats, which is a form of body percussion. Keeping beat using percussion instruments, so you can use chopsticks, clapsticks from Indigenous Australians. Indigenous Australians use them traditionally and have done so for centuries, thousands of years. So chopsticks is an example of something you can put together to make a beat. I remember my grandmother doing this awesome beat with between a hand and a bench top or table and a spoon. So using instruments like that to create a beat. You can do an echo beat, so you clap and then the children repeat that clap, whether that's with their body, using their hands, their feet in terms of stomping, chopsticks, clapsticks, whatever it might be. You can use untuned instruments to make an orchestra. You can just imagine what that would sound like. But very, very valuable for child development. And graphic notation, so where you draw symbols to represent a sound. So you might have, you might play a sound effect, and children graphically represent that in terms of a drawing that they do. So you play a loud sound, and they draw a picture of something which represents loud, and that will be different for a lot of different children. A soft sound, a shaking sound, a really hard sound, a high-pitched sound, and so on. And so they draw a symbol to represent that sound. What is rhythm? Rhythm is not, I've got a spelling mistake there, is not constant. Rhythm varies. It follows the words in a song and it uses a symbol system. Ways to explore and develop rhythm include echo clapping. So you'll see a lot of these activities for exploring these musical elements are often the same. You can use echo clapping to develop rhythm. You can use rhythmic notation, so following specific music notation, and creating percussion charts or using commercially produced ones. So create your own percussion chart or find your own commercially produced one, and you find that by simply Googling for it, commercially produced percussion charts. What is tempo? So tempo is the speed of the music. Activities you can use to explore tempo include hide and seek. So for example, hiding the duster at a place in the room. So the child or a small group of children cover their eyes, and then someone is selected or you go and hide an object, and children have to try and find that, or the child has to find that based on the other children making a noise, and the louder they get or the faster they get, the speed, so not the loudness but the speed that they get in the sound they're making. So it might be clapping, so they start clapping faster when the child gets closer to where that object is in order to direct them, so using directions through music, so through sounds. So clapping faster in order to represent that they're getting closer to where that duster is, and clapping slower to where when they're moving further away from the duster. Songs that use tempo for effect, so for example, Oki Toki, and then you've got listening to music, and if you're not sure what that is, Google it, and listening to music and identifying tempo changes, only because I don't know what that is myself. But yeah, listening and identifying to tempo changes. So playing a song and then that's got different changes in tempo, so different speed, and getting the children to recognise and point out when the song goes faster, when the song goes slower. Dynamics. Dynamics is the expression of the music. Again, activities to explore dynamics include echo songs. You can have echo tuned and untuned percussion instruments. So the children echo the sound that you make with a tuned or untuned percussion instrument. You can have them listen to music and identify the expression. So what expression does this music have? Is the expression happy, sad? Is it upbeat or low and depressive a little bit? As well as changes in the expression. So get children to identify when there are changes and what are those changes. And you can also do following hand gestures. So have fast hand gestures or whatever it might be in some way, and get children to explore the expression of a song based on your hand gestures. So something like that would be very direct. Whereas something like this is sort of slowing it down, getting low and calm, and so on, and whatever. So, and graphic notation is the other one. Other activity is an example of what you can do to explore dynamics. Tone color. What is tone color? It's the quality of the instruments that convey the sound. So the tone color is the quality of the instruments that convey the sound. Activities include sound effects for songs, so different sound effects and using sound effects in the songs. Identifying tuned and untuned instruments by and for their tone color. So identifying these instruments by tone color, so what instruments are being used, or what instruments would you use for a particular tone color. So we've got musical instruments being used here, what's being used, or we want to create this expression, what musical instruments would we use to represent that. And listening to music and identifying different sounds. Form. Form is the organisation of the music, and it's how the music is arranged. Activities to explore form include reading music and recognising the arrangement, listening to music and recognising the arrangement, or arranging your own performance piece. So the first two, the difference is reading the arrangement, and the second one is listening to the arrangement. Melody is the variation in sound, and it's also referred to as pitch. So it's how the sound varies. Activities to explore melody, so recognizing high to low sounds. You can do that using Simon Says, for example. So Simon says make a high sound, Simon says make a low sound, or you might make a high sound while playing Simon Says, or you might make a low sound while playing Simon Says. So it's all about varying the sound, so the pitch. You can play musical instruments to develop and explore melody, so develop and explore the variation in sound. You can follow simple and repetitive notation, following chords or accompanying a song using tuned instruments, so playing along with a song. Texture and harmony are the layers of sound. For example, an orchestra versus a duet. So there's going to be a lot of layers to a sound in an orchestra because there's so many instruments being played. There are many layers to it. So there's a detailed texture, there's or harmony. Whereas a duet, there's going to be much less, many less layers to a sound. There may still be more than two, but there's not many, and there may be less than two, but there's still less layers to it. So an orchestra is going to have a stronger texture than what a duet is going to have. Activities to explore this, texture and harmony, is moving and dancing to different layers. So having different children move to one layer and have different children move to another layer, for example, or moving differently to a layer. Identifying layers when listening to the music, so identify the different layers just by sitting there and listening to music, and creating texture in your own performance piece. So put together your own song or music and create your own texture, so your own layers of sound. Style. This is where the music comes from. So for example, the era, so does it come from the 90s music, 1950s music, 1800s music, the genre, rock versus hip-hop versus classical versus country. Social group is also the style. So different social groups. So you've got, gangster rap is something that comes to mind for me for a social group. Or it could be, who's that guy? Could be more kind of folk type music in terms of, or country. And then you've got different culture, so the style being culture as well. So, the didgeridoo is very synonymous with Indigenous culture. So clapsticks and so on, different styles in African music and Asian music, and there's so many in those continents. There's so many different styles. In Asian cultures, for example, Thai is slightly different to Indonesian and so on. Activities to explore style include listening, singing, and playing. So listening, singing, and playing to a wide variety of music styles. Identifying the music style, so identify the social group, identify the culture, identify the era, identify the genre, for example. And studying the influence of music styles on history. So how have the styles of music influenced people throughout history? Singing. This is what I touched on at the very start. Singing, our voices are our most important resource as a teacher, whether it's you talking to the students, talking to parents, talking to colleagues, but using your voice to sing is very, very valuable in engaging children and getting them to learn new concepts and reinforce older concepts. So use your voice to sing. Don't be embarrassed to sing. And sometimes, I've said this before, I don't know if it was in this class, I've used my voice to sing out of frustration because I've just said the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. And it's just been, if I don't turn this into a fun-loving thing, then I'm going to snap and lose it. And so it might be, put your chairs away, so you don't have to be a good singer to sing, but just, I suppose, be slightly confident and just do it for maybe a bit of a shock factor to get children to follow with what you're asking them to do. But certainly in terms of learning something new, using songs is so valuable. And I think about this with my own kids who, as I've said before, 6, 5, 3 and 1. The 6-year-old I see has been using music for a little while. The 5-year-old who's in transition prep is using music a lot more, and he's very good now at remembering words. Compared to last year, the developmental difference is massive, from his Christmas concert and him remembering the words to a song at the end of that, being a 4-year-old, to now being, at the start, still only in term 1 of transition, so not even 6 months later, but him being able to remember the words to a song, which they're learning to learn a new concept, whether it's in maths or reading and writing or whatever it might be. And then the 3-year-old who's in early childcare, who's been singing "Ba ba black sheep, have a many wool, yes sir," and he doesn't really know the words, but he's making the words up based on the way they sound to him. So he's not specifically using words, but he is transferring those words into sounds based on the way it sounds when he hears it. So there's a big difference between 3 and 5 in terms of children being able to recognise lyrics. So in terms of developing literacy skills, it's music is so valuable. So our voice is our first instrument. So before you learn the guitar or the flute, you've got your voice as an instrument in music. It's important to don't underestimate its value, and hopefully I've given you a couple of examples there with how valuable it is. In your class, it's essential to sing for and with children. As I said before, kids, not today, but I have said before, kids love singing, kids love music, and when there's music, it's just much more joyful and enjoyable. So use the fantastic tool that you have. There's different songs you can use. This is the last slide. But you've got nursery rhymes, you've got repetitive songs, and there's a reason why nursery rhymes have been around forever and a day, because they develop children in so many ways. So not only in learning, how to speak and listen and eventually, read and write, as well as mathematical concepts, but also just to learn morals and stories. For example, London Bridge is falling down to pass on a story. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. I don't know if there's a moral behind that, but maybe it's that you don't go and sit up on the wall, because if you fall down, you'll crack your head open or something. But Humpty Dumpty is an example there of a nursery rhyme. There's so many other repetitive songs out there, which 100 bottles of beer on the wall, is a way of learning how to count backwards, or maybe not with beer on the wall, but 99 bottles of bottles on the wall, or whatever. I don't know. I'm going off track a bit here. Echo songs. So getting children to echo songs. This happens a lot in school sports days and working with school sports teams or school house colours. So echoing, lyrics, but also question and answer. So who's the best? We are, or something. I can't even think of an example. But in terms of school sports days, asking a question in the song and having the group go through and chant the answer afterwards. Changing the words to songs, so adaptive songs, for example, The Wheels on the Bus. So changing the words to that to be slightly different. As you know, that song goes, the wheels on the bus go round and round. And it might become, more specific to your classroom. So rather than saying the boys on the bus, it might be something more specific to your class. You've got rounds and cannons, for example, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. And as I touched on before, ballads are very valuable as for many things, but one of them is passing on information and learning about history, and an example is Waltzing Matilda. Okay. I will quickly just show you. So I talked earlier, you've got these three PowerPoint presentations which you can go through for further reading. Remember, if you're feeling stressed or you're or anxious about your workload, I suggest you focus on what your priorities are, and they are the assessments. So assessment 1, which is due very soon. All this information in here will help you. Take from it as much as you need in order to be able to do the assessments. There's a whole bunch of links in here to YouTube videos in this example here for the 4 methodologies and approaches to music. We've got more videos here, so examples of hand clapping routines, lullaby, red gum, and this video on Sesame Street by Jessica Mauboy, singing 5 Kangaroos as a way of teaching counting to 5. What I love about that is that it's from a Indigenous Australian point of view, so it's culturally appropriate and very specific to Australian culture. So I do really like that. So you need to consider that in your assignment, how you would incorporate your lessons, your arts portfolio. So in terms of 3 lessons, and how you will incorporate children from diverse backgrounds as well as different cultural backgrounds. So that's something which you should really consider. There's also up here the old presentation. I'm just going to take you through this quickly. A lot of it's I've already talked about, but I'll just talk about it quickly. So musical learning and understanding occurs through listening, sharing, discussing, reflecting, performing, composing, and recording. The definition of music is that we understand and define music as a culturally situated human expression and communication that uses sound and silence. Silence is very important. It's not just about what you hear, but it's also what you don't hear. The same with the way the universe works. It's not just what you can see in the universe, which is important, but everything that you can't see. So the black stuff, the dark matter, it's what isn't there is just as important as what is there. So in terms of music, without rest periods in between different notes, then the music wouldn't be what it is. So it's uses sound and silence to express ideas. Most important in this understanding is it is a unique auditory form of shared human endeavour. We're social beings at the end of the day, and music is a way of communicating in an auditory form in a unique way. According to the Australian curriculum, art is all about making and responding. So you see that over and over again. In terms of art, it's all about making, but then responding. Main points. Number 1, different approaches to engaging with music in the early childhood and primary classroom environment. The elements of music, the process of which music is used to engage students, and the way music operates in the curriculum. And if you want to know more on that, then check out these reviews here, these first 2, particularly this top one. Music is part of human existence and the human experience, and surrounds us in everyday life. If you listen to the radio at some point today, I'm sure you would have heard some form of music, but even just different sounds in terms of nature and environment. So it's an activity that you can do, and you can put this on the discussion board if you like. What does music mean to you, and what was your music educational experience? Reflect and discuss these statements. So consider either now or you can write these down again on LearnLine in the discussion board. everyone is musical. Do you agree with that? Do you agree every person is musical? Like I said, I struggled with the whole Goldilocks clap using my hands and knee. So I didn't think I was very musical, but there's certainly other ways where I do think that I'm musical. So do you agree with that everyone is musical or not? Music education should be available to all, yes or no? Music education is only for the talented, so should only the kids who express a talent in music engage in musical education? And music education should be compulsory, so whether you're talented or not, should every child be made to do some form of music training? Elements of music, I've talked about them. The different approaches, so you've got the 4, and then teaching for music understanding is the bottom point. Music in early childhood settings, so recognising and supporting the infant. So you've got, again, I touched on this in the last presentation, but environment, so creating a stimulating environment for the baby. Learning through play, so having music playing in order to learn through play. Community, so parents and primary caregivers participating in the activity related to music. Knowledge and sequence of learning, and relationships and attitude. So for infants, it provides, they respond to stimulating sounds. It provides an auditory and physical stimulus. Musical stimulus by singing to the infant, so you can sing to them. A lot of parents do. Musical stimulus by playing music to the infant. Toddlers, you can use their energy to provide a rich musical landscape, so they want to be playing and running around and jumping and bouncing, and you can use music to help encourage movement. Create ways for them to find sounds, so try and find the sound through the house or through the classroom or outside. You can sing familiar songs or nursery rhymes. Provide opportunities to move with music. So Play School and Sesame Street, for example, were great opportunities, great examples of being able to move with music and copying the person on the screen, and use music in storytelling. Young children, so there's more opportunities through singing, playing and movement, and introducing more of the musical language, as well as provide a space for them to play music, whether that's with tuned, untuned instruments, percussion instruments, body percussion and so on. In the primary years, the role is musical elements and processes, making and responding to music, curriculum knowledge, sequence of learning, relationships and attitude, and consultation. Foundation to Year 2, continuation of play-based learning, group games and chants, singing, music and movement, using musical instruments and experimenting with sound, recording compositions and listening to a variety of styles, so things that you do at various ages. Years 3 and 4, so there's more of an emphasis on musical notation. Increased emphasis is put on diversity of styles. Play-based learning is continued. Group games and chants, you've got singing, music and movement, and using musical instruments and experimenting with sound, as well as recording compositions. In grades 5 and 6, there's more emphasis on musical notation and understanding that, form judgments and opinions on music they make and respond to, increasing an emphasis on a diversity of styles. Group games and chants, if you can't remember what styles and all that meant, go back to that last presentation or rewind this. Group games and chants, singing, music and movement, using musical instruments and experimenting with sound and recording their own compositions. So soundscapes. It's an organisation of sounds and silences, not just noise. I've gone into that already and talked about the importance of the rest or the silence in music. Engage in listening, creating and performing, and every soundscape is unique. Here's an activity that you can do to develop this. So sit in a room and spend a minute listening to the sounds around you. What do you hear? Go around the room and create sounds by tapping on tables, scrape the floor, blow through paper, and then do this in a group. And you can use this in an early childhood class setting. Create your own graphic notation for each sound, then create your own musical score. So you might be getting the children to create their own graphic notation by drawing images which they think of, which they visualize when they hear a sound. Listen, compose, perform, process. Use a work such as the carnivore of the animals for this, and how can each concept be used to incorporate into this process. There's some resources if you'd like to download this and click on them. And in conclusion, musical is a central part of human existence and natural parts of the worlds of children. Early childhood and primary educators have a unique role in the delivery of quality music education experiences to the child in their care. It is you who will allow music to make a difference in children's lives. Alright, thanks for joining me in this presentation, and I'll see you next week.